Some of you know that Terry and I are kind of into personal fitness. We like to be in shape, but make no mistake about it, if you see me out running, don't get the idea that I enjoy running. I enjoy bacon and I enjoy pie. So I run. And some days are better than others, but let me tell you what I really, really don't like. And I found out recently, Kobe and I have this thing in common. I cannot stand running on a treadmill. When the weather's bad or when it's too cold or too hot, I will go to the gym and I will run on a treadmill, and I hate every single second of it. You run for 30, 40 minutes and you go nowhere. You see nothing. It seems like a colossal waste of time. It is so boring. I mean, I put my headphones in, I got my music going and all that. I just can't stand running on a treadmill. You ever feel like life is like that, though? You ever feel like you're stuck on a treadmill? Feel like you're just running and running and running, but you're running in place, like you're not getting anywhere, like there's no point to it. I think at least at one point or another, most of us, if not all of us, have felt that way at some time. And you might be feeling that way right now. We are reading words inspired by God through a man who felt like that. He's near the end of his life, and he'd been running over and over and over. He had been doing everything he could, running every direction he could, and at the end of his life, he's saying basically, I have gone nowhere. Nowhere. We are in the book of Ecclesiastes. We're in chapter 1. Last week we started the series. You can catch that online. And if you didn't get one of these little overviews that I wrote, we gave these out last week. You find them laying at all the exit points out here. You can pick one of these up or take as many as you need. And if we run out, we'll be happy to print some more. Just give you a little background information and an overview of the book of Ecclesiastes. But we're going to pick up in verse 3. And if you'll remember, those of you who were here last week, we saw the basic theme of Ecclesiastes, which is spelled out in verse 2. This man, Solomon, who calls himself now the preacher, he's at the end of his life, he gathers people together, he's got a sermon that he wants to preach to them, so he calls himself the preacher, and his theme of this sermon he preaches, which is the book of Ecclesiastes, is simply this: vanity of vanities. All is vanity. That word vanity is the word for vapor, and he says it's everything in life we pursue is the vapor of vapors. It's vaporous, it's meaningless. At the end of your life, it means nothing. What he does now is he states that theme, and now he starts fleshing it out. He starts telling us what he means by all of this. Verse 3, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down, then hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run into the sea. The sea's not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they will flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been done already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. So after saying everything is vanity, everything is a vapor, he explains by asking, what gain is there under the sun? Interestingly, that word gain in the original language, this was written in Hebrew, that word gain only appears in the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, and it appears 9 times here. It is a word that we might translate profit, because it is the word for what you have left over after you pay all your bills. Now, some of you are saying, wait, you're supposed to have something left over after paying all your bills? Ideally, that's the way it works. If you're operating a business, you need to have something left over after paying your bills. We call that a profit. And so his argument is that there is no ultimate profit. There's no ultimate profit. You've probably heard the story of John Rockefeller, who was, in fact, I think he's considered, based on inflation, still to be one of the wealthiest people who has ever lived. Rich oil man in the 19th, when did he die? Maybe the early 20th century when he died. Very, very wealthy man. And after he died, a reporter asked his spokesman, how much did he leave behind? And do you remember the answer? All of it. He left all of it behind. All that big pile of money. By the way, when he died, it was around $336 million. He didn't take any of it. No profit. So first, the preacher tells us there's no profit in the natural world. Like a treadmill, the preacher makes the case that the world is going nowhere. Look what he does. He talks about people. Look at verse 4 again. A generation goes and a generation comes. Now I want you to look closely. It doesn't say a generation comes and a generation goes, does it? It says a generation goes and a generation comes. This is important. In the original language, in Hebrew, it is in this order to give emphasis on the first part of that. In other words, to say a generation comes and a generation goes would just be to say, here comes a generation, and before you know it, it's gone. It would be talking about the brevity of life, which we would all say is true, and the older you get, the more that you realize how short life is. But no, he's not talking about the brevity of life. He's talking about the lack of importance, if you will, of every generation. You got a generation, they think they're great, they die, and they're replaced by another one. You're going to die someday. Well, there's babies being born all the time. Here they come. And we're not going to be that. Remember, do you know what's interesting, though? Every generation is impatient with the generation before it and the generation after it. Have you noticed that? Talk to a teenager about old people. They're not that enamored with you. They think you're old and you don't get it and you don't know what's going on, and they can get really impatient with you because you don't move as fast as they do and you don't know as much as they do. Right? In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I hired a young man. He was 22 years old, right out of college. One of the best hires I ever made for a church staff position. Sharp young man. But he did something really dumb. He was having lunch in the break room at church with all the church secretaries. All these middle-aged women. And he made the comment, but of course, my generation is way smarter than your generation. He told me about it. I said, brother, I cannot help you. You are on your own. So they turned on him. So he starts digging this hole deeper by explaining, well, we have so much more information now. We have the internet, and look at all the information. And it just went from bad to worse for the guy. But you know what? The older generations are also impatient with the younger generations. My generation is more special than yours. When I went to school, we walked uphill both ways in the snow. You kids don't know what it means to work hard. You kids don't appreciate anything. And isn't that the way it is? Every generation thinks it's special. And you know what Solomon says? Your generation's going to die, and another one's going to come, and it's going to die, and another one's going to come, and it's going to die, and everybody thinks they're special, and you're not. Man. Thanks a lot, Saul. Same old, same old. He points to the earth in verse 4. He says, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Right now, everybody's so upset about climate change, and I am not talking about that today. But the truth is, the earth just keeps on going, doesn't it? Wars, storms, earthquakes, climate changes, some bad stuff, some good stuff. And what does the earth do? It just keeps turning on its axis and moving around the sun. Same old. It's not going anywhere. The sun, he talks about in verse 5. The sun rises, the sun goes down, hastens to the place it rises. I am not a betting man, but I would bet everything I own if I can get somebody to take this. I would bet everything I own that tonight the sun will set and it will rise again tomorrow. We know, I could even tell you what time those things will happen. We know this. It is so predictable. And this is interesting, by the way. The word translated hasten here is literally in Hebrew the word pants. The sun pants to the places it rises. In other words, the sun's just going around. Here we go. Here's another day. Moves through the sky, goes through the night, and here it comes again. It doesn't change. It doesn't improve. It's predictable. No profit. It's like a treadmill. The wind. Now, here's something not on a treadmill. The wind is not on a treadmill. The wind blows all over the place. The wind is so free. Look how he describes the wind. Around and around goes the wind. In fact, literally in the original language, it says going, turning around, going. It's just this play on words just to show how futile it is, because the wind is so free and it just keeps blowing and going everywhere. And where does it go? Nowhere. It's not profiting anything. It's not getting anywhere. The sun is predictable. The wind is not predictable. But what's the one thing they have in common? They're on the same treadmill. Just on the same treadmill. Living in New Orleans, big city, big odd city, neat place. I used to like to go to the French Quarter, and I would strike up conversations with travelers. Are you familiar with the term travelers? Travelers, these homeless people, but they're not typical homeless people. They're not like the bums, they're not like the people with mental problems a lot of times. Travelers are typically young people who are homeless on purpose. They didn't want to have a job. They didn't want to live by the rules of society. They just wanted to strike out on their own. They hitchhike or jump trains to go all over the country because they didn't want that boring old, same old. And I talked to so many of these travelers, and every one of them I talked to, you know what I learned? They exchanged one kind of boring repetition routine for another kind of boring repetition routine. That's the difference between the wind and the sun. The sea, in verse 7, streams run into the sea, but it doesn't fill up. Think about the sea Solomon may have been thinking about at that time. He's not far from what sea? The Dead Sea. 1,380 feet below sea level. There's no outlet. The Jordan River flows into it. All these wadis and tributaries flow into it over and over. They just keep flowing into the Dead Sea. There's no outlet. And does it overflow? It never gets full. It just sits there. Same for all the seas, all the oceans. What's the point? All of this, he says, is for nothing. We look to nature for meaning, and we see one long treadmill. No profit in the natural world, and no profit, secondly, from human experience. In verse 8, he talks about the weariness. All things are full of weariness. Everything is weary. Can't life be terribly frustrating? You live, you die, you struggle. Preacher talks about our bodies. First, our mouths. Our mouths. A man cannot utter it. We can't even articulate the frustration that we have. In fact, I remember when I came to the place where I realized, man, something's just not right. I'm not getting in and out of life what I know I should be getting out of life. And by the way, everything was good. Everything was good. Career, Terry, everything good in my life. And I'm frustrated, I'm empty, and I couldn't even put it into words. I remember sitting down with the preacher and going, I don't know what's wrong. He knew what was wrong. He knew what I needed. Our eyes, he says in verse 8, are never satisfied. It's been documented that when people are going to those bad, dark places on the internet, what do? They just can't get satisfied. They keep going to darker and darker and deeper recesses. But it's not just with that. We can't satisfy our eyes with anything that we look at. We have to buy more apps for our phones. We have to see more movies. We have to take more trips to see so many different things. We were in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, Terry and Steve and Don and I, we were out there looking at some possible mission opportunity for Central out in Seattle. And it was an unusually clear day in Seattle. If you've ever spent much time in Seattle, you know they don't have a lot of clear days. It was an unusually clear day in Seattle, and you could see Mount Rainier. And it's just majestic. So we get there, the day we get there, we're taking the train, the light rail, into Seattle. And every now and then the light rail turns, and you could see out one of the windows, you could see Rainier. And you know what I noticed? The four of us were the only four people on the train who cared anything about seeing it. All those people that live there, if you were to walk up to somebody that lives there and go, look at that, they'd go, yeah, it's Mount Rainier. They want to see something else, don't they? They want to go see the beach. They want to go see the Grand Canyon. They want to see something else because we just can't get our eyes satisfied. We can't get our ears satisfied. Here's a test of your age. How many of you remember a song came out in the 70s called Music Box Dancer? Any of you remember that? I played it for Terry the other day. She recognized it, of course, and I said, why did this become a hit? I can't figure out why a song, I mean, it's a great song and all that. I just can't figure, it's just a piano medley. It sounds like music you would play in a music box. I mean, it's a cute, upbeat little piano song. It's a happy song. Well, when that sound came out, I was a teenager, and I had a really nice stereo system, you guys. Speakers this big, and had the turntable and the radio. Radios used to have a dial on them, and had an 8-track tape player, and I could record onto the 8-track tape player from the radio or from the record player. Well, my mom went and bought the 45. You young people, hang with me. It looks like a CD, but it's not a CD. It's about this big, and it's black. It's got a great big hole in it. It's called a 45 because it turns at 45 RPM. An LP, the big one, turns at 33 1/3 RPMs. Aren't you glad you came today to hear that? So my mom goes and buys the 45 of Music Box Dancer. She gets a blank 8-track tape. She says, I want you to put this on that over and over and over again. And I did. And every time I got in my mom's car, we listened to nothing but Music Box Dancer. Took me about a day, and I was done with that. But it took my mom a long time. But you know what? My mom eventually quit listening to it. She eventually got tired of it. Our ears just get tired. Those of you, now here, I'm talking to younger people now, like me. Wasn't that funny? Okay, maybe it was. Take your device where you keep all your songs and compare the number of songs you own to the number of songs you listen to. Because you got to have that song. And a few weeks later, it's old. Because we're just never satisfied. Our ears aren't satisfied. Our eyes aren't satisfied. Everything gets old. Then he even talks about human history, verses 9 and following. What has been will be. What has been done is what will be done. There's nothing new under the sun. Now, some of you are going to say, that's not right. There are lots of new things, Mike. Since Solomon wrote that, there are new nations. There are new ideas. There's a lot of new technology. Let's think about that for a minute. There are different nations. But is anything really different? Same problems. History is cyclical. In fact, I kind of think if you want to know about the future of America, if we keep going like we're going, just study the history of Rome. I think you can learn some things. History is a great teacher about the present because everything changes, and the more everything changes, the more everything stays the same. What about new ideas? Well, people are more enlightened now, right? We're smarter now. Our generations are smarter. We've learned some great new ways to think. There are a lot of people today who have realized that science and nature will tell us everything we need to know. We can develop our own rules. We can establish a society, and we just need to look to science and nature and just treat each other with fairness and justice. You know who that sounds like? Sounds like a guy named Zeno. Those of you that know history, I'm not talking about Zeno, the guy with the paradoxes. I'm talking about a Zeno that lived 100 years later who founded a belief system called Stoicism in around 300 BC. Oh, this new atheism's really new, isn't it? Spiritualism. Mike, everybody always worship gods, but today people can just be spiritual. You don't need religion. You don't need an organization. You don't need anybody telling you anything. You just need to be spiritual. And it's good to get in touch with the natural world. It's good to live a simple life and just treat people right and be a good person. That sounds exactly like a guy named Epicurus, father of Epicureanism from around 300 BC. Oh, but what about postmodernism? That's the new kid on the block. People are saying, there's no right and wrong. We determine our own truth, our own standards. We just need to live to make ourselves happy. I can define myself however I want. I can create my own rules. I can be whoever I want to be. Nobody should tell me what to do. Nobody should tell me what to think. The highest goal in life, the highest virtue is personal pleasure. We call that hedonism from around 400 BC. Started with a guy named Aristippus. Lots of new ideas, right? They're all prepackaged and blended together, and there's nothing new under the sun. But what about technology? We got smartphones, space travel, indoor plumbing, and you can take a vitamin that looks like a gummy bear. That's cool. Let's look at these in perspective, though. Imagine you read headlines about the latest communication device. Man, it's cutting edge. It is breakthrough, and everybody wants one. Everybody always wants the newest, right? You got a smartphone last year. Well, this year you're going to have to get a new one because that one's old. So the newest communication device comes out. Everybody wants one. It's going to revolutionize the world. Now, am I talking about the newest smartphone or the telegraph? Because that's the way they reacted about the telegraph. Your smartphone's going to be old next year. And by the way, I just want to ask this. Are we really better off with our smartphones? Or are they just these balls and chains that we drag around because they're weighting us down? What about jet travel? I got to thinking about this. I can go to Dallas, get on a United Airlines, and Danny Watson can fly me to Munich nonstop. Matter of hours. It's pretty impressive. You got to admit, that is really impressive. Terry and I have gotten on a plane in Detroit and landed in Shanghai, right over the North Pole. That's just cool. But let's put it in perspective. Can we put that in perspective? The smart people tell us, and I've no reason to doubt them, that our universe is at least, and we have to say at least because they can't measure it all yet. We only have so much information. But it's at least 93 billion light years in diameter. You understand what a light year is? A light year is not a measure of time, it's a measure of distance. It is the distance light can travel in a year. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. Times 60, you get per minute. Times 60 again, you get per hour. Times 24, you get per day. Times 365. 186,000 times all those things. That's a big number. They had to come up with a new name for it. It's a light year. The light from a star on the edge of the universe will take 93 billion years to travel to the other side of the universe. And we can go 6,000 miles. How impressive is it really? In the scope of everything. How great are our advancements? How new are things that are going to be old tomorrow, but we don't remember? That's what he says in verse 11. We don't remember this. There's no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of future things. It's the way it is. We forget our history. I took a mission trip to Kiev, Ukraine, 10 or 11 years ago. I took my daughter, she was a teenager, and a bunch of 20-somethings. I was in my 40s. And we went to Kiev, and while we were there, one thing we kept hearing from our translators is we have to take you to the Chernobyl Museum. Raise your hand if you remember Chernobyl. Raise your hand if you've never heard of Chernobyl. Right. So we go to Chernobyl Museum. I was under the assumption everybody knew what this was because I lived during that time. We go to the Chernobyl Museum. They'd never heard of it, and I found out that among these young adults, there was no concept of the Soviet Union. There was no concept of the Iron Curtain. There was no concept of the Cold War. Now, in case you're sitting there thinking, well, I've never heard of those things, they're really, really important for today. In fact, I have to wonder if people are so enamored with socialism today because they forgot the disastrous effects globally of socialism. Everything's meaningless. A couple of 20th century philosophers argued as much. You may have heard of Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus. These guys, atheistic, naturalistic philosophers, argued that everything in life, they said life is absurd. It's absurd. No point to it. It's meaningless. Everything's just a random biological accident in life. In fact, Camus went further than that. Camus said not only is life absurd and meaningless, but it is cruel and twisted. Camus said, Camus is a philosopher and a writer. And he said, really, the only meaningful, the only serious philosophical question is whether or not to commit suicide. Life is so cruel, so harsh, so meaningless. The only real question we need to ask is, should I go on? Or should I end it all? These aren't just old ideas. Richard Dawkins, famous, very popular atheist today, said there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference. Is that what the preacher's saying? Sounds like it, doesn't it? Life is meaningless, so there's no point to it. It's not what he's saying, and he gives us a clue. He gives us a clue in 3 words. A phrase that appears 25 times in Ecclesiastes and nowhere else in the Old Testament. 3 words. There is no prophet under the sun. Under the sun is the key to understanding the message of Ecclesiastes. There's nothing to gain under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. I talked about something in Wednesday night prayer meeting, and they were so excited I decided to talk about it today. Actually, they weren't that excited, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. There's a guy named Kurt Gödel. He's an Austrian-American who in 1931 shocked the mathematic world. Shocked mathematicians, made them mad. Had ripple effects through physics and chemistry and biology and philosophy when he formulated what he called the incompleteness theorem. Hang with me, I'm not going to get real technical. But there have been mathematicians, physicists, cosmologists, and still are, who are looking for what they call the theory of everything. They say there is something in the natural world that explains everything. There is something that holds everything together, that gives everything its order, that sustains the universe and gives it its ultimate meaning. There is a theory out there, but nobody's figured it out. I find it interesting that they laugh at us for believing things you can't see. Because they're convinced there's this something out there that they can't see or define, but they know it's there. Gödel comes along. Says you will never find within a system the answer or explanation to that system. You can't. Something cannot explain itself. An example, take a bicycle. If you look at a bicycle, can you look at that bicycle and explain the purpose of the bicycle, where that bicycle came from? You cannot. What do you have to do? You have to look outside the bicycle and you go, okay, we look outside the bicycle. That came from a bicycle factory. Okay, so a bicycle can't just exist in itself and explain itself. There has to be an explanation. There has to be an origin for it, and that origin didn't make itself. It came from a bicycle factory. So, okay, now we know all about bicycles. They come from bicycle factories. But now let's go to the bicycle factory. Let's draw a circle around the bicycle factory. Where did it come from? How did it happen? Did it create itself? Does it explain itself? No, we have to go beyond the bicycle factory, and we have to come up with builders and architects and designers and all those things and so forth and so on. And the great thing is, the implication is, if you get to the natural world, the material world, if you get to the universe, how can it explain itself? So according to the incompleteness theorem, the only way we can understand the universe, the only way we can get answers, the only way we can really know the theory of everything is we have to go outside the universe. We have to go outside the natural world. We have to go outside atoms. We have to go outside dark matter. We have to go outside everything natural to find where it came from. Friends, to understand the universe, you have to look outside the universe, and if you're looking for something particular in life, you have to look in the right place. Now, just imagine for a minute. I wake up tomorrow with a bad cold, so I go down to Allen's Tire. Say, Tim, man, I got a bad cold. You need a new set of tires. So he puts on a new set of tires, and I drive off happy because I have found my answer. And I wake up Tuesday feeling worse. So what do? I go back to Allen's. I go, man, I feel worse today. Think you need a brake job. Brake job's going to fix you up, Mike. You'll feel great. So I get the brake job, and I do this 3 or 4 days till I'm broke. What's my problem? I'm looking in the wrong place to find what I need. And let me tell you that if you are looking under the sun, if you are looking in the natural world, if you are looking to human experience, if you are looking to the material universe to find the deepest needs of your soul, you are looking in the wrong place. And the world will make promises to you. Oh, if you just own this, if you just experience that, if you just buy this, if you just do that, then your life is going to have meaning and purpose and happiness and fulfillment. And what's the problem? We keep coming up short because we're looking in the wrong place. But what if I go down there tomorrow and go, hey, man, Tim, I feel bad. And he says, well, what are you doing here? And he gives me directions over to Porter's Pharmacy. And he says, go over to Porter's, tell the pharmacist what's wrong. The pharmacist will sell you something to make you feel better. Tire shop doesn't work for Kohl's, but there might be somebody at the tire shop that can give me directions. Psalm 19, verse 1 on the screen. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims His handiwork. The heavens, the stars, the sun, the moon, all the sky, everything we see is not there so we can get answers from it. It's there to point us beyond the sun. Romans chapter 1, verse 19 on the screen says that the invisible attributes of God, having been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, look at this, in the things that have been made. There is nothing to gain under the sun. There is nothing new under the sun. So our takeaway is that if you want real profit, if you're looking for the things that matter, you have to look beyond the sun. If you want meaning, you have to look beyond the sun. You want purpose, you have to look beyond the sun. You want real happiness, you have to look beyond the sun. You want to find satisfaction in life, you have to look beyond the sun. That's what Solomon's telling us. Everything under the sun is meaningless. The sea, the birds, the wind, the sun, meaningless. Whatever you can look at, whatever you can hear, whatever you can experience, meaningless. Unless you're looking at those things to point you beyond the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. But when the book of Revelation describes the new heaven and the new earth, look what we read here in Revelation 21:5. And he who was seated on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. There's nothing new under the sun, but everything is new beyond the sun. Everything is new beyond the sun. Now you're thinking, so do I just need to wait till I die? No. I don't like that Lamentations is called Lamentations. Because if you're going to read a book in the Bible, you're probably not going to want to read one called Lamentations. Because that's just a downer. But Lamentations is a series of poems lamenting the fall of Jerusalem, written by Jeremiah. And I want you to think about this. Jerusalem was where the hope of God's people was. It's where the temple was. The presence of God dwelt there. There were promises of God attached to that city. This is the city of David. It is the city of God, and now it lies in ruins. All hope is lost. Jeremiah expresses the grief of the people of Israel in the death of their hope, and then he tells them, he turns their hearts and says, no, God did this. Our mourning is supposed to point us to something beyond the sun. Our hope can't lie in a city. Our hope can't lie in anything on earth. And listen to what he says in Lamentations chapter 3. This is on the screen. His mercies never come to an end. Look at this. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in Him. His mercies are new. Nothing new under the sun. You want something new? You got to look beyond the sun. You want meaning, purpose, happiness, satisfaction? You want something that'll last? Stop looking in the wrong place. Nothing new under the sun, but His mercies are new every single morning. In Romans 10, we are told how to be saved. What does that mean anyway, to be saved? That's one of those churchy terms we use. Why do we use it? Because it's in the Bible. But what does that really mean? What am I saved from? To be saved means that I am made right with God. I am put in a right relationship. I have right standing with God. You see, the human condition that we all suffer with is that we are all sinful creatures. You calling me a sinner? Yeah. I'm calling me a sinner. We're all born that way. Romans 3 tells us there is no one good, not one. This idea, well, I believe people are basically good. False. Read the newspaper. Walk outside. People are not basically good. People are fallen. We're broken. We're sinful. Because of our sin is cosmic treason against God. Our sin is not oopsies. Our sin is not mistakes. Our sin is not my bad. Our sin is cosmic treason against the King of the universe, and He doesn't take it lightly. And there is justice to be had for that. There is eternal condemnation for that. But the great thing is, on the cross, Jesus didn't just get nailed to the cross. He didn't just get whipped and beaten. He didn't just die a physical death, although that's horrible enough. But He bore all of the eternal anger and wrath of a righteous God that we had stored up with our sins. He took it all on Himself. And here's the great thing. Romans 10 tells us how to get in on it. Romans 10 says you don't have to say, well, who's going to go to heaven and get this for us? Or who's going to ascend into the grave and bring it up for us? He says, no, it's near you. It's in your heart. It's in your mouth, that all you have to do is believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you will be saved. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How many is everyone? That's everyone. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Will be saved. What does that mean? I'm no longer under the condemnation of God. I'm no longer being judged because of my unrighteousness, which, by the way, I still have. I'm now being judged by the righteousness, the perfect righteousness of Jesus. And because of that, I'm saved from wrath. I'm saved from the anger. I am saved from hell. I am saved for all eternity. The moment I say I truly believe in my heart, not just my head, yes, my head, but in my heart, and I cry out, Lord Jesus, save me. And He says, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Why in the world wouldn't you do that right this second? Why would anybody go, oh, you mean I'm under condemnation from God and I can be made right with God if I truly believe this? Well, I do believe it, but I got to call out to Jesus. I don't know. Why? wouldn't you turn to Jesus? You can go on living in your sin. You can go on chasing things that will never satisfy you. And you know it because you're still chasing, aren't you? You're still chasing. If you were satisfied, you'd stop chasing. Why would you do that when life and hope and purpose and meaning and happiness and satisfaction are waiting for you? Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Let's pray.